So, let me get this straight. You're shipping me to a chunk of cosmic debris that can't even sustain basic bacterial life, where I'm supposed to, what exactly? Die of boredom before the atmosphere kills me? Colonel Wei leaned back in his chair, the holographic display between us casting an eerie blue glow across his weathered face. He looked at me like I was a mathematical equation that refused to balance. Lieutenant Richards, your understanding of the assignment is colorful, yet fundamentally correct, except for the dying part. That's optional. I snorted. Optional, he says, like I'm choosing between coffee flavors. The Galactic Defense Force doesn't waste resources, Lieutenant. Even punishment deployments serve a purpose. Right, and what purpose does sending me to... I squinted at the file. XP-4327 serve exactly? Wei's expression remained impassive. Observation, intelligence gathering. Standard perimeter defense installation. On a dead rock? The Araxians claimed it was within their territory. We disagreed. Now it's a buffer zone. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me. So I pissed off Admiral Donovan, and now I'm being sent to defend a worthless rock that nobody wants, from nobody in particular, because bureaucracy demands we plant a flag on every piece of cosmic dust? Your understanding continues to be exceptional, Lieutenant. Wei slid a data chip across the desk. Your transport leaves at 0600. 6 months deployment. Minimal supply drops. 1 emergency extraction protocol if the situation becomes untenable. Untenable? On a dead planet? Wei finally cracked a smile, though it held all the warmth of deep space. The universe is full of surprises, Richards. Perhaps you'll finally learn to expect them. The transport pilot, a wiry woman who introduced herself only as Hobbs, had the bedside manner of a surgical drone and seemed to find my predicament hilarious. Dead planet, Richards, she chortled as we began our descent towards the dust-colored sphere below. That's what they're calling you back at base. Charming, I muttered, strapping myself into the jump seat as turbulence rattled the small craft. Any other nicknames I should know about? Kamikaze Kane has a nice ring to it. My name is Marcus. Doesn't have the same flow. She shrugged, hands dancing across the controls with practiced ease. Anyway, you've got the standard supply package. 6 months of rations, atmospheric processor, basic shelter units, defense perimeter, comms array, the usual dead-end deployment kit. The ship bucked violently, and I gripped my harness tighter. This seems excessive for a planet with no strategic value. Hobbs glanced over her shoulder, eyebrow raised. Above my pay grade, Lieutenant. I just fly the damn ship. The landing was rough, the craft settling onto the dusty surface with a series of mechanical groans that did nothing for my confidence. Hobbs helped me unload my equipment with surprising efficiency, then gave me a mock salute. Try not to die too quickly. I've got 50 credits riding on you lasting at least 3 months. Your concern is touching. She grinned. Welcome to XP-4327, Richards. Population, 1 very unlucky human. The transport lifted off in a swirl of dust and ion exhaust, leaving me alone on a planet that, according to all surveys, was as dead as my military career. I surveyed my new domain. The landscape was a monotonous expanse of rust-colored rock and dust, broken occasionally by jagged outcroppings of darker stone. The sky was a washed-out amber, with twin suns, one large and yellow, the other a smaller, redder companion, hanging low on the horizon. The gravity was slightly less than Earth standard, giving each step a subtle bouncy quality that I knew would become annoying within hours. Well, I said to absolutely no one, home sweet home. It took me nearly 6 hours to set up the base camp. The shelter units were standard military issue, hexagonal modules that could be connected in various configurations. I arranged them in a compact cluster, sleeping quarters, supply storage, operations center, and a utility module that housed the atmospheric processor and water reclamation system. By the time I finished, the smaller sun had set, leaving its larger companion to cast long shadows across the barren landscape. I stood outside my new home, hands on hips, and took a deep breath of the processor-filtered air. This is fine, I said aloud, voice flat. Totally fine. Just 6 months on a dead rock. No problem. Something skittered across a nearby rock formation, too quick for me to get a good look. I froze. The intelligence brief had been explicit. No indigenous life forms. Not even microbes. The planet's radiation levels, atmospheric composition, and temperature fluctuations made it inhospitable to any known form of life. Yet I'd definitely seen something move. I drew my sidearm, a standard-issue pulse pistol that I'd never actually fired outside of training. and approached the rock formation cautiously. "Hello?" I called, feeling simultaneously foolish and terrified. "Anyone there?" Silence answered me, broken only by the whisper of dust moving in the light breeze. After a thorough search revealed nothing, I chalked it up to fatigue, stress, and the disorienting gravity. Just my mind playing tricks, conjuring movement where there was only shadow and dust. That night, as I lay in my bunk listening to the soft hum of the atmospheric processor, I updated my mission log. Day 1 on XP4327. Base camp established. All systems nominal. No observations of strategic value. Planet appears to be exactly what the survey said. Dead. I hesitated, finger hovering over the send button, then added, possible visual anomaly observed near base camp. Likely stress-induced hallucination. Will monitor. Little did I know that those final sentences would save not only my life, but potentially the entire sector. By day 3 I was going stir-crazy. There's only so much equipment you can check, perimeter you can patrol, and rocks you can stare at before the monotony starts to eat away at your sanity. I'd set up the comms array to automatically scan for signals, not expecting to find anything but needing something to occupy the system's processing power. I'd also established a daily routine. Morning equipment check, breakfast, perimeter patrol, midday meal, system diagnostics, another patrol, evening meal, personal time, sleep. Rinse, repeat, don't go insane. It was during the afternoon patrol of day 3 that I noticed something odd about one of the rock formations about half a kilometer from base camp. I could have sworn it wasn't there yesterday. That's impossible, I muttered, pulling up the topographical map on my wrist display. Sure enough, according to the scan I'd run on day 1, there should be nothing but flat terrain in that direction for at least a kilometer. Yet there it was, a jagged spire of dark rock, maybe 3 meters tall, thrusting up from the dusty surface like a broken tooth. I approached it cautiously, pulse pistol drawn. As I got closer, I noticed something else unusual. The dust around the formation was disturbed in a pattern that looked almost like footprints? But not human footprints. They were triangular impressions, approximately 15 centimeters across, arranged in pairs. Whatever had made them was bipedal, but definitely not human. "Okay," I said aloud. "This is concerning." I circled the rock formation, keeping my distance. The surface appeared to be the same composition as the rest of the planet's rocky outcroppings. A dense, igneous material with crystalline inclusions that caught the sunlight in flashes of dull purple and amber. Except for one small section on the north side. There, embedded in the rock about a meter above the ground, was what appeared to be a perfectly smooth, matte black rectangle, approximately 10 centimeters by 5 centimeters. "Definitely not natural," I muttered, stepping closer. I raised my hand, hesitating just short of touching the object. Every instinct and protocol warned against direct contact with unidentified alien artifacts. Instead, I pulled out my scanner and ran a basic analysis. The results were confusing. According to the scanner, there was nothing there. No object, no anomaly, just solid rock. But I was looking right at it. A black rectangle that was clearly not natural. I took a step back, considering my options. The smart move would be to report this immediately. But that would mean admitting I'd found something unusual on a planet that was supposed to be completely dead. That would either get me extracted immediately, not necessarily a bad thing, or more likely branded as hallucinating and left here for the full 6 months with a note in my file about cracking under pressure. I need more evidence, I decided, taking several high-resolution photographs with my wrist unit. Something the sensors can actually detect. I returned to base camp and spent the evening analyzing the photos and scanner data, trying to make sense of the discrepancy. The photos clearly showed the black rectangle, but when I ran image analysis, the system identified it as a shadow anomaly rather than a physical object. That night I added to my mission log day 3 on XP4327. Observed anomalous rock formation approximately 500 miles northeast of base camp. Formation was not present in initial survey. Observed unusual impressions in surrounding dust consistent with non-human bipedal movement. Identified possible artificial object embedded in formation, but scanner unable to confirm its physical properties. Continuing to monitor situation. Request analysis of attached images and sensor data. I sent the log, not expecting a response until the next scheduled communication window in 3 days. Base protocol dictated that I maintain radio silence except during predetermined windows unless facing an immediate emergency. As I was preparing for sleep, the comms array, which had been silently scanning for signals since I set it up, suddenly pinged. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. It pinged again. I spat into the recycling unit and hurried to the operations module. The display showed a rhythmic signal, weak but distinct, emanating from directly beneath my base camp. "That's not possible," I muttered. running a diagnostic on the comms system. The diagnostic came back clean. The system was functioning perfectly. I switched to a different frequency band, and the signal disappeared. I switched back, and there it was again. A regular pattern of pulses, almost like a heartbeat. I recorded a sample of the signal and added it to my mission log as an urgent update, overriding the communications protocol. This wasn't something that could wait 3 days. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the operations module, listening to the rhythmic pulsing through the comms system and watching the scanner for any sign of movement outside. Around local midnight, the signal changed. The regular pulses became more complex, forming a pattern that repeated every 47 seconds. It wasn't random, it was too precisely structured for that, but it didn't match any known communication protocol in my database. I was no longer alone on XP4327. The response from command came faster than I expected. By 0600 the next morning, I had a terse message from Colonel Wei. Continue observation. Do not engage any potential entities. Reinforcement package deploying in 36 hours. Maintain position. Reinforcement package. Not extraction, not a scientific team, but a reinforcement package. The military euphemism sent a chill down my spine. I spent day 4 alternating between monitoring the signal, which continued its complex pattern without change, and observing the rock formation in the distance, which had not moved or changed since I discovered it. No additional formations had appeared, and I saw no other signs of activity on the planet's surface. But the signal continued, pulsing up from beneath the ground, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Late in the afternoon, as the larger sun began to set, I noticed something unusual about the dust near the base of the shelter modules. It was moving, not blowing in the wind, but shifting slightly, as if something was pushing up from underneath. I approached cautiously, pulse pistol drawn. The movement stopped as I got closer, but I could see that the dust had been disturbed in a roughly circular pattern about a meter in diameter. I knelt down, keeping a safe distance, and scanned the area. Again, the scanner detected nothing unusual, just dust and rock. "What are you?" I whispered. As if in response, the dust shifted again, more noticeably this time. A small mound formed in the center of the circle, rising perhaps a centimeter above the surrounding surface. I backed away slowly, keeping my weapon trained on the disturbance. The mound stopped rising when I was about 2 meters away. We remained in this standoff, me pointing a gun at a tiny pile of dust, the dust doing absolutely nothing, for nearly 10 minutes before I decided to try something. I holstered my weapon and took a step forward. The dust mound immediately subsided, flattening back to the level of the surrounding terrain. I took another step forward, and the dust scattered, as if blown by a sudden gust of wind, revealing a small, perfectly circular opening in the ground beneath, a hole perhaps 5 centimeters in diameter. I froze, staring at the opening. It was too perfectly formed to be natural, the edges too clean. And then something emerged from the hole. It was small, no larger than my thumb, and moved so quickly that I barely got a glimpse of it. All I registered was a flash of iridescent blue-green, multiple jointed appendages, and then it was gone, scuttling away across the dusty ground faster than seemed possible for something its size. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just seen. According to every survey, every report, every scrap of intelligence, this planet was dead. Completely lifeless. Yet I'd just seen something alive, something that moved with purpose and intelligence. And then I remembered the signal coming from beneath my base camp. "Holy shit," I whispered. "They're underground." I spent the rest of the evening fortifying my position as best I could, using the shelter module's emergency sealing protocols to ensure nothing could enter through the floors or connection points. I also set up motion sensors at regular intervals around the camp perimeter, though I had little faith they would detect whatever I'd seen given the scanner's inability to register the creatures. That night I updated my mission log, day 4 on XP4327. Signal continues from beneath base camp. Observed possible life form emerging from small opening near shelter module. Entity approximately 3 to 5 centimeters in size, blue-green coloration, multiple appendages, moved with apparent intelligence and purpose. Have sealed shelter modules and established sensor perimeter. Awaiting reinforcement package. Request immediate scientific consultation on findings. As I was about to send the log, the comm system pinged with an incoming message. The signal from below had changed again. Now it was faster, more erratic, almost frantic, and it was getting stronger. "That can't be good," I muttered, adding this information to the log before sending it. I spent another sleepless night, this time with my pulse pistol in hand, jumping at every sound the shelter's systems made. By morning, the signal had stabilized again, returning to its regular 47-second pattern, but at nearly twice the strength it had been when first detected. Whatever was down there, it knew I was here, and it was responding. The reinforcement package arrived precisely on schedule 36 hours after Wei's message. It wasn't what I expected. Instead of additional personnel, the automated drop pod contained specialized equipment, advanced scanning devices, sample collection kits, a more powerful communications array, and, most worryingly, a set of plasma charges designed for subterranean deployment. The message accompanying the package was equally concerning. Preliminary analysis suggests potential xenobiological infestation. Deploy scanning equipment to map subsurface activity. Collect samples if possible without direct contact. If hostile intent confirmed, deploy charges at strategic points to neutralize threat. Additional supplies and extraction scheduled in 30 days pending mission outcome. 30 days. They were extending my stay on this supposedly dead rock by a month, with the understanding that I might need to blow up whatever was living beneath the surface. Fantastic, I muttered, unloading the equipment from the pod. From babysitting dust to potential genocide in under a week. New personal record. The new scanning equipment was significantly more powerful than my standard issue gear, using a combination of ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, and quantum resonance imaging to create a three-dimensional map of the subsurface. I deployed the sensors in a wide perimeter around the base camp, taking care to avoid the areas where I'd observed the dust disturbances. The system would need several hours to collect enough data for a comprehensive analysis, so I turned my attention to the more powerful communications array. This wasn't just a more sensitive receiver. It was a full translation matrix designed to analyze unknown communication patterns and extrapolate potential meanings based on contextual repetition and structural linguistics. They think I've made first contact, I realized aloud. I connected the new array to my existing system and fed in the recordings I'd made of the subsurface signal. The translation matrix immediately began processing, complex algorithms searching for patterns and potential meanings. While the systems worked, I conducted another perimeter patrol, this time with one of the sample collection kits at the ready. The strange rock formation was still there, unchanged, but I noticed several new small holes in the ground at various points between it and my base camp. I approached one of the holes cautiously. It was identical to the one I'd seen yesterday, perfectly circular, about 5 centimeters in diameter. I set up a passive collection trap nearby, a small device that would activate if anything passed through its sensor field. By the time I returned to base camp, the subsurface scan was complete, and the results were staggering. Beneath the apparently lifeless surface of XP-4327 was an intricate network of tunnels, chambers, and structures extending at least 200 meters down, the maximum range of the scanning equipment. The network was densest beneath my base camp, with tunnels radiating outward like spokes from a wheel. And there was movement within the tunnels. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of small, fast-moving entities, concentrated in larger chambers but also traveling through the tunnel network with apparent purpose. This isn't an infestation, I said, staring at the three-dimensional holographic representation floating above the scanner's display. It's a civilization. The translation matrix pinged, indicating it had completed its initial analysis of the signal. The results were preliminary and heavily caveated, but the system had identified what it believed to be basic communicative elements. Attention markers, location indicators, and, most concerningly, what the system categorized as alert patterns that had begun shortly after my arrival. I was about to record these findings in my mission log when one of the perimeter motion sensors triggered. Something was approaching the base camp from the direction of the rock formation. I grabbed my pulse pistol and moved to the observation port, scanning the dusty terrain outside. At first I saw nothing, but then a flicker of movement caught my eye. A small procession of the blue-green creatures was making its way toward the base camp. Unlike the solitary entity I'd glimpsed earlier, these moved slowly, deliberately, in formation. There were 7 of them, arranged in a V-shape, with the lead entity carrying something that glinted in the sunlight. They stopped about 10 meters from the main shelter module, forming a semicircle. The lead entity placed its shiny object on the ground and backed away slightly. I zoomed in using the port's optics. The object was small but clearly artificial. A polished fragment of the crystalline material I'd seen embedded in the rock formations, shaped into what appeared to be a perfect pyramid about 3 centimeters tall. It's a gift, I realized. Or a message. Protocol dictated that I should not engage, should not expose myself to potential contamination or attack. But staring at the tiny procession waiting patiently outside my shelter, I knew that this moment transcended protocol. I sealed my environment suit, checked the weapon at my side, and stepped out of the shelter. The creatures didn't flee at my appearance. They remained in their semicircle, motionless except for a slight swaying motion that reminded me of tall grass in a gentle breeze. Now that I could see them clearly, I was struck by their appearance. They were larger than I'd initially thought, closer to 10 centimeters in length, with 6 jointed limbs and a segmented body covered in iridescent scales or plates that shifted color as they moved, predominantly blue-green but with flashes of copper and gold. Their heads were triangular, with 3 glittering compound eyes arranged in a triangle pattern. They were beautiful, alien, and utterly unexpected on this supposedly lifeless world. I stopped a few meters away from them and slowly, deliberately holstered my weapon. Then, mimicking their formation, I knelt down to bring myself closer to their level. The lead entity, distinguished by slightly more gold in its coloration, stepped forward and made a series of rapid movements with its front limbs. The motion reminded me of sign language, deliberate and patterned. It was trying to communicate. I raised my own hands, palms forward in what I hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent, then slowly pointed to the crystalline pyramid they had placed on the ground. The lead entity made another series of gestures, then backed away, rejoining its companions. I waited a moment, then slowly moved forward and picked up the crystal pyramid. It was heavier than it looked, and warm to the touch even through my gloved hands. The surface was perfectly smooth, without visible seams or markings. As I held it, the crystal began to glow faintly from within, a soft amber light that pulsed in a now familiar 47-second pattern. It was a communication device. I looked up to thank the creatures, but they were already retreating, moving back toward the rock formation in their deliberate V formation. I returned to the shelter with my extraordinary gift, my mind racing with the implications. I had just made peaceful first contact with a previously unknown sentient species, a species that had evolved or adapted to live beneath the surface of a planet that all our instruments had declared dead. The crystal pyramid continued to pulse in my hands as I set it on the scanner for analysis. This time, the system had no trouble detecting the object, confirming it was composed primarily of the same crystalline material found in the planet's rock formations, but refined and structured at a molecular level that suggested advanced technological capability. The translation matrix, when connected to the pyramid, suddenly began processing data at an accelerated rate, as if the device was actively facilitating communication. That night, my mission log was succinct but profound. Day 6 on XP-4327. First contact established with indigenous sentient species. Species appears to reside primarily in subterranean structures. Peaceful exchange of technology initiated. Request immediate scientific and diplomatic personnel. Do not deploy subterranean charges under any circumstances. I sent the log with the highest priority designation, then settled in to watch the translation matrix as it worked to decipher the language of XP-4327's unexpected inhabitants. By morning I had a name for them, the Zekthal. 3 weeks later I stood on a rise overlooking what had become a bustling outpost. My solitary shelter modules had been joined by a research facility, diplomatic quarters, and a small security detachment. A steady stream of personnel and equipment arrived daily as the Galactic Defense Force scrambled to adjust to the reality of a sentient civilization on what was supposed to be a dead planet in a contested border region. Colonel Wei, who had arrived with the first wave of personnel, stood beside me, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the activity below. "You realize what you've done, Richards?" he asked, not looking at me. "Discovered an unknown sentient species and established peaceful first contact?" I suggested, trying to keep the smug tone out of my voice and failing miserably. Wei snorted. "You've created a diplomatic incident of interstellar proportions. The Araxians are claiming we violated treaty agreements by establishing a presence here." "The treaty excluded planets with indigenous sentient life," I pointed out. "Which XP-4327 definitely has." "Yes, and the Araxians are suggesting we either manufactured evidence of the Zekthal or transported them here to justify our claim." I laughed. "That's absurd. The Zekthal have been here for millennia. Their civilization extends kilometers below the surface, which conveniently can't be detected by standard planetary surveys," Wei said dryly. "The Araxian ambassador is demanding proof." "Then let them meet with the Zekthal delegation," I said. "The translation matrix is working well enough now for basic diplomatic exchange." "That's actually why I came to find you," Wei said, finally turning to look at me. "The Zekthal have requested your presence at the meeting. They specifically asked for First Speaker Richards." I blinked in surprise. "First Speaker?" "Apparently, in their culture, the one who initiates communication with a new civilization holds a position of honor and responsibility in all future interactions." Wei's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Congratulations on your diplomatic promotion, Lieutenant." "I'm not trained for diplomacy," I protested. "And I didn't send you here to discover an alien civilization," Wei countered. "Yet here we are. The meeting is in 1 hour. Try not to start an interstellar war." With that comforting advice, he headed back toward the outpost. leaving me staring at the landscape that had become strangely familiar over the past few weeks. The Zekthal had dramatically increased their surface presence since our first encounter. The single rock formation had been joined by dozens more, each marking the entrance to a major tunnel system. They seemed to be adapting to surface conditions more quickly than anyone had anticipated, constructing crystalline structures that captured the sunlight and channeled it below ground. I'd learned through our limited communications that the Zekthal had always known about the surface world, but had little reason to venture into what they considered a harsh and dangerous environment. My arrival had spurred a long-dormant initiative to explore the possibility of surface colonization. In essence, I'd accidentally triggered a major evolutionary step for their entire civilization. No pressure, I muttered to myself, making my way back to the outpost to prepare for the diplomatic meeting. The meeting was held in a specially constructed chamber that accommodated both human and Zekthal physiological needs. Dim lighting, higher humidity, and a terraced floor that allowed the smaller Zekthal to be at eye level with seated humans. The Araxian delegation arrived first, 3 tall avian humanoids with iridescent feather scales and sharp calculating eyes. They wore the elaborate ceremonial armor that marked their diplomatic corps, weapons conspicuously absent as per protocol. I took my place at the human delegation's table, alongside Colonel Wei and Dr. Navarro, our chief xenobiologist. Wei had insisted I wear my full-dress uniform for the occasion, which felt stiff and uncomfortable after weeks in practical field gear. "Remember," Wei murmured as we waited, "let me do the talking unless directly addressed. The Araxians are looking for any excuse to claim procedural violations." I nodded, focusing on maintaining a neutral expression as the Zekthal delegation entered the chamber. There were 5 of them, led by the gold-flecked individual I now knew as Shimmering Path Navigator, the equivalent of their diplomatic chief. They moved with fluid grace across the terraced floor, taking their positions opposite both human and Araxian delegations. "Greetings to the assembled representatives of distant skies," Shimmering Path Navigator began, its translator device rendering its complex gestural language into somewhat poetic standard. "We welcome this exchange of thoughts and intentions. The Araxian Protectorate extends cautious greetings," responded the lead Araxian diplomat, whose name translated roughly as "wind through spires." "We come seeking clarity regarding the sudden discovery of your civilization in a region long monitored by our sensors." There was an edge to the Araxians' words that didn't need translation. The accusation was clear. This was a human trick, a fabrication to justify territorial expansion. Shimmering Path Navigator's body colors shifted subtly, displaying patterns that I'd learned indicated something between amusement and offense. "The people of Crystal Depth have dwelled beneath this surface since the Third Great Alignment," it responded. "Your sky eyes see only what reflects light. We are not obligated to shine for your convenience." I suppressed a smile at the diplomatic burn. The Zekthal, despite their relatively limited exposure to interstellar politics, had quickly grasped the concept of territorial disputes. "We have monitored this planet for decades," Wind Through Spires insisted. "No energy signatures, no radiation patterns, no heat differentials indicative of civilization." "The people conserve and contain," Shimmering Path Navigator replied. "What purpose would there be in announcing our presence to the empty sky?" Until First Speaker Richards descended, no sky dweller had set foot upon our world with peaceful intent. That caught everyone's attention. Colonel Wei shot me a sharp glance. "Are you suggesting prior contact with non-indigenous lifeforms?" he asked carefully. Shimmering Path Navigator turned its 3-eyed gaze toward me. "First Speaker knows of the metal fragments, the broken sky vessels, the dead who came before." I swallowed hard. During my explorations with the Zekthal over the past few weeks, they had shown me chambers deep beneath the surface where they preserved artifacts, pieces of spacecraft, equipment, even preserved remains of various species, including what appeared to be Araxians. "XP-4327 is in a strategically valuable position," I said slowly, choosing my words with care. "It's possible that it has been used as a covert disposal site for evidence of activities that certain parties wouldn't want discovered." The lead Araxian's feather scales flared in what I recognized as an anger display. "You accuse the Protectorate of—" "I accuse no one," I interrupted smoothly. "I merely observe that the Zekthal have collected evidence of previous visitors who did not announce themselves through official channels. Perhaps those visitors assumed, as we did, that the planet was lifeless." Wind Through Spires settled back, feather scales slowly flattening. "This is unexpected information. The Protectorate would be interested in examining these alleged artifacts." The people do not object to sharing knowledge of the sky dead, Shimmering Path Navigator replied. But this world, Zektara in our speaking, is our dwelling. We claim its depths and now its surface by right of continuous habitation. A claim the Galactic Defense Force acknowledges and supports, Colonel Way interjected smoothly. We propose that XP-4327, or Zektara, be formally recognized as sovereign territory of the Zekthal, with appropriate protections under interstellar law. Wind Through Spires made a sharp cutting gesture. The Araxian Protectorate cannot recognize a claim based on evidence we have not verified. Then verify it, I said, earning another sharp look from Way. Send your scientists. Examine the artifacts. Meet with the Zekthal elders. But be aware that the Galactic Defense Force now has a mutual defense pact with the Zekthal government. This was news to everyone in the room, including Colonel Way, whose expression could have frozen the surface of a lava planet. A defense pact? Wind Through Spires repeated incredulously. Negotiated when, precisely? I looked to Shimmering Path Navigator, who had shifted to a bright gold-color pattern that I'd never seen before. After a moment's hesitation, it made a complex gesture that the translator rendered as, "The first speaker anticipates our intentions with remarkable clarity. The formal exchange of protection promises was to be proposed at this gathering." I exhaled slowly, grateful for the Zekthal's quick thinking. The details remain to be finalized, of course, but the principle has been discussed. Colonel Way recovered admirably, adding, "The Galactic Defense Force is prepared to establish a permanent outpost on Zektara, at the invitation of the indigenous government, to provide technical assistance, cultural exchange, and defensive capabilities as needed." Wind Through Spires looked from Way to me to Shimmering Path Navigator, calculation evident in its sharp gaze. Finally, it made a gesture of resignation. "The Araxian Protectorate will dispatch a scientific delegation to verify these claims. Until then, we neither recognize nor dispute the sovereignty of Zektara." This meeting is concluded. The Araxians departed with the rigid formality that characterized their diplomatic protocols. As soon as they were gone, Colonel Way turned to me with a look that promised a very uncomfortable debriefing in my near future. "A mutual defense pact, Lieutenant?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. Before I could respond, Shimmering Path Navigator intervened, its colors shifting to a soothing blue pattern. "The first speaker's understanding of our needs is why the people trust him to speak on matters of sky politics," it said. "We would indeed prefer the presence of Richards and his sky warriors to the feathered ones who dispose of their inconvenient truths on our world." Way held my gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "We'll discuss the details of this arrangement at length, Richards. For now, consider yourself the official liaison to the Zekthal government, reporting directly to me." After the colonel departed with Dr. Navarro, I turned to Shimmering Path Navigator. "Thank you for backing my play. I spoke without authorization." The Zekthal's colors rippled in what I now recognized as their version of laughter. "First Speaker Richards was sent to die on our world, yes? This is what the other sky people whisper when they think the people cannot understand. Yet now you bring life and purpose instead. The people find this fitting." "I'm glad someone does," I muttered. "The feathered ones will return," Shimmering Path Navigator continued, its colors darkening slightly. "They have left many dead on our world. They will not abandon their secrets easily." I nodded. "That's why we need the defense pact to be real. Not just a diplomatic bluff. The Araxians won't risk direct conflict with the GDF. "The people have defenses of our own," Shimmering Path Navigator said, its gestures becoming sharper, more precise. "We have studied the sky weapons from the dead ones. We have adapted. We have prepared." That caught me by surprise. "You've reverse-engineered Araxian weapons technology?" "And others. Many sky peoples have discarded their broken things on our world. The people learn. The people adapt." Its colors shifted to a deep, vibrant purple. "The people survive." A chill ran down my spine as I fully comprehended the implications. The Zekthal hadn't just been collecting artifacts. They'd been studying them, learning from the technology of the sky peoples, who had mistakenly believed this planet was nothing more than a convenient dumping ground. "I think," I said slowly, "we should have a more detailed conversation about exactly what technologies you've acquired." Shimmering Path Navigator-S colors rippled again. "The first speaker is wise. Come below, to the Chamber of Sky Relics. See what the feathered ones have left behind." The Chamber of Sky Relics was unlike anything I could have imagined. Located nearly a kilometer beneath the surface, it was a vast cavern filled with artifacts arranged in meticulous order. Pieces of spacecraft, weapons, communication devices, even preserved remains of various species. "Holy shit," I whispered, staring at what appeared to be an entire Araxian scout ship, relatively intact despite having clearly crashed with significant force. "How did they get this down here?" "The people have ways of moving through stone," Shimmering Path Navigator explained as we walked through the chamber. "What falls from the sky, we can bring below if it holds knowledge." I examined the artifacts as we passed them. Some I recognized as Galactic Defense Force technology, older models but definitely human in origin. Others were clearly Araxian. Still others belonged to species I couldn't identify. "How long have you been collecting these?" I asked. "Since the fourth alignment, approximately 200 of your sky cycles, 200 years. The Zekthal had been gathering and studying technology dropped, crashed, or deliberately hidden on their world for 2 centuries. "And the Araxians?" I asked, gesturing toward their scout ship. "How long have they been using your world as a dumping ground?" "The feathered ones began coming regularly 60 sky cycles ago. At first only small vessels that had been damaged. Then larger ones. Then vessels with no damage but containing things they wished to hide." "Like what?" Shimmering Path Navigator led me to a sealed crystalline container. Inside were what appeared to be data storage devices, hundreds of them, neatly arranged. "The feathered ones believe these were destroyed," it explained. "They were not. The people preserved them, learned to access their stored knowledge." "What's on them?" "Maps, plans, records of places the feathered ones have visited beyond the known sky territories. Records of weapons they have developed in violation of sky treaties." I stared at the container, understanding the magnitude of what I was being shown. This could be evidence of massive treaty violations. Possibly even war crimes, depending on what's in those records. "Yes. The feathered ones have done things in the deep sky that the other sky peoples would not approve." I took a deep breath, trying to process the implications. The Araxians had been using this dead planet as a repository for their darkest secrets, never suspecting that an intelligent species was watching, collecting and learning from everything they discarded. "We need to bring this to Colonel Way immediately," I said. "This changes everything about our diplomatic position." Shimmering Path Navigator-esque colors shifted to a questioning pattern. "The people have shown this to First Speaker Richards because we trust his judgment. Will the other Sky Warriors use this knowledge wisely, or will they become like the feathered ones, seeking power beyond their territory?" It was a fair question. The Galactic Defense Force wasn't exactly known for its restraint when presented with a strategic advantage. But this wasn't just about military strategy. This was evidence of systematic treaty violations that needed to be addressed through proper diplomatic and legal channels. "I can't promise that everyone in my government will make good decisions," I said honestly. "But I can promise that I'll do everything in my power to ensure this information is used to hold the Araxians accountable for their actions, not to start a war." Shimmering Path Navigator considered this, its colors shifting through several patterns before settling on a calm blue. "The first speaker's words ring with truth vibrations. The people will trust in your guidance." "Thank you," I said, feeling the weight of that trust settle on my shoulders. "But before we bring this to Way, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Can you show me what's on these data storage devices?" "Some, yes. Others contain patterns the people cannot yet interpret. But come, we have prepared a viewing chamber for this purpose." The viewing chamber was a smaller cavern adjacent to the main collection, filled with a hybrid of Zekthal crystal technology and salvaged equipment from various species. At the center was what appeared to be a modified holographic projector, adapted from an older model GDF tactical display. "The people have combined technologies to access the sky knowledge," Shimmering Path Navigator explained, gesturing to one of its assistants who began activating the system. "It is not perfect, but it shows much." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a star map that extended far beyond the known boundaries of explored space. Regions that were empty on official GDF charts were filled with detailed information, planets, resources, even what appeared to be established Araxian outposts. They've been expanding into uncharted space for decades, I realized, establishing colonies and mining operations without registering them with the Galactic Council. "Yes. The feathered ones take what they desire, then hide the evidence of their taking." The display shifted, showing designs for weapons systems that made my blood run cold. "Planet killers, biological weapons, Technology that had been explicitly banned by interstellar treaty after the Proxima Centauri disaster a century ago. I struggled to find words adequate to the horror I was witnessing. This is worse than I imagined. The Araxians haven't just been violating territorial agreements, they've been preparing for full-scale war. The people have observed this truth, Shimmering Path Navigator confirmed, its colors a solemn gray. The feathered ones speak of peace, while building machines of ending. I watched as the displays showed test footage of a weapon that could destabilize a star's fusion process, essentially turning it into a time bomb that would obliterate its entire system when it detonated. How close are they to deploying these weapons? I asked, my mouth dry. Some already exist beyond the known sky territories. Others remain as knowledge only. The most terrible. Shimmering Path Navigator made a gesture I hadn't seen before, which the translator couldn't interpret. The most terrible are being built now, in secret places. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just evidence of treaty violations. This was a revelation that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in known space. If the Araxians had already deployed even a fraction of these weapons in their unregistered territories, they could potentially hold entire systems hostage in any future conflict. We need to bring this to Wei immediately, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But we need to be careful about how we present it. If this information becomes public too quickly, without proper verification and diplomatic preparation, it could trigger the very war the Araxians are preparing for. The people understand caution, Shimmering Path Navigator agreed. We have watched. We have waited. We have prepared. Prepared how exactly? I asked, suddenly remembering its earlier comments about adapting sky weapons technology. In answer, Shimmering Path Navigator led me to another section of the chamber, where dozens of Zekthal were working on what appeared to be modified versions of various weapons systems, some Araxian, some human, some unidentifiable. The people will not be helpless if the Sky War comes, it said simply. I stared at the weapons, recognition dawning. You've been adapting these for your own physiology, creating versions you can use. Yes, the people learn, the people adapt. And the crystalline formations on the surface? The ones that appeared after I arrived? Energy collection. Power for the deep systems. For the defenses, if they are needed. I looked at Shimmering Path Navigator with new appreciation and, I had to admit, a touch of apprehension. The Zekthal weren't just peaceful subterranean dwellers who had been unwittingly pulled into interstellar politics by my arrival. They were a technologically advanced civilization that had been quietly observing, learning, and preparing for potential conflict for generations. Your people have been playing a very long game, I said. The people think in cycles, not moments, Shimmering Path Navigator replied. We watch, we learn, we prepare, and when the moment comes... Its colors flashed a brilliant, fierce red. We survive. I nodded slowly, understanding that I had stumbled upon something far more significant than a simple diplomatic incident. I had discovered a civilization that might well hold the key to preventing, or winning, an interstellar war that had been brewing beneath the surface of galactic politics for decades. I think, I said carefully, that the Galactic Defense Force and the people of Crystal Depth have a great deal to offer each other. Shimmering Path Navigator-S colors rippled in agreement. The first speaker understands. This is why the people chose you to be our voice to the sky. Colonel Wei stared at the holographic display in silence, his weathered face unreadable as the evidence of Araxian treaty violations played out before him. We were in a secure room beneath the human outpost, connected directly to the Zekthal tunnel system. Shimmering Path Navigator and two of its advisors waited patiently as Wei absorbed the implications of what we'd shown him. Finally, the colonel spoke. You understand that if we bring this to Galactic Command, it will cause a diplomatic crisis unlike anything we've seen in a generation. I understand, I replied. But if we don't, we're essentially enabling the Araxians to continue building weapons that could potentially destroy entire star systems. Wei nodded slowly. The verification process alone will take months, and the political fallout. He trailed off, then turned to Shimmering Path Navigator. Your people have been sitting on this intelligence for how long? The people have been collecting for many sky cycles, the Zekthal diplomat replied. But understanding came slowly. The full meaning of what the Feathered Ones hide became clear only in recent cycles. And you chose to share it with us now because First Speaker Richards has shown that some sky peoples can be trusted. Because the Feathered Ones grow bolder in their hidden actions. Because the time of watching must end if the people are to survive what comes. Wei looked at me, a hint of grudging respect in his eyes. It seems your punishment deployment has turned into something rather more significant, Lieutenant. Just lucky, sir, I replied with a faint smile. Luck had nothing to do with it, Wei said, shocking me. You were sent here precisely because of your tendency to question protocol and think creatively. We needed someone who would notice things a more conventional officer might overlook. I stared at him. You're saying my assignment here wasn't punishment? Oh, it was definitely punishment, Wei clarified with a thin smile. But punishment assignments can serve multiple purposes. The Admiral thought a few months of isolation might teach you some discipline. I thought it might give you an opportunity to demonstrate your unique perspective. You knew? I asked incredulously. You knew there was something unusual about this planet? Not specifically, no. But we had anomalous readings from deep scanning probes over the years. Nothing concrete enough to justify a full scientific mission, but enough to raise questions. Questions that were consistently dismissed or buried in bureaucracy whenever we tried to pursue them. By Araxian sympathizers within the GDF, I realized. Wei nodded. Most likely. The Araxians have been cultivating influence within our administrative branches for decades. Subtle, but effective. So what do we do with this information? I asked, gesturing to the holographic evidence still rotating between us. We proceed carefully, Wei said. First, we need to establish the authenticity of these records beyond any possible doubt. Colonel Wei's response was equally simple. No. What followed was a tense standoff. The Araxians had superior firepower in orbit, but they couldn't simply bombard the planet without destroying the very evidence they were trying to eliminate. And they had no way of knowing exactly what defenses the Zekthal might have developed from the technology they'd been collecting for centuries. I found myself in the unlikely position of coordinating between Zekthal defense teams and human tactical officers, translating not just language, but strategic concepts between species with vastly different approaches to warfare. The people can disrupt their landing vessels, Shimmering Path Navigator explained as we gathered in the tactical center. The crystalline networks on the surface are not merely for show or energy collection. They can project fields that interfere with certain propulsion systems. Anti-gravity disruptors? One of the human tactical officers asked, looking impressed. That's advanced tech. Adapted from Feathered One vessels that crashed 60 sky cycles ago. The Zekthal confirmed. Not perfect, but effective within a limited range. So we can prevent them from landing directly on top of us, I summarized. Force them to deploy ground forces from a distance and approach on foot or with surface vehicles, where we'll have the advantage of prepared positions and knowledge of the terrain, the tactical officer added, nodding appreciatively. The people also have ways of moving through the ground that the Feathered Ones cannot detect, Shimmering Path Navigator added. We can emerge behind their forces, strike and vanish again. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of the Araxians, with all their advanced technology and military doctrine, being harassed by what would essentially amount to guerrilla warfare from beneath the ground. So we have options for ground defense, I summarized. But what about their ships in orbit? If they get frustrated enough, they might decide to simply bombard the entire area and worry about recovering evidence later. That is where the Sky Warrior's contribution would be most valued, Shimmering Path Navigator acknowledged. The people's weapons cannot reach the high sky. Colonel Wei, who had been listening while coordinating with our orbital assets, joined the conversation. We have 2 corvettes en route, but they won't arrive for at least 12 hours. Until then, our options are limited. What about the defense satellite network? I asked. The one that was supposed to be installed as part of my original mission? Wei raised an eyebrow. You actually read the full mission brief? I'm impressed, Lieutenant. I had a lot of time on my hands during transit, I replied dryly. The defense satellites were deployed but not activated, Wei confirmed. Standard procedure for buffer zone installations. They're in a dormant orbit, awaiting command authorization. Can we bring them online remotely? In theory, yes, but they're basic models. Point defense systems mainly, designed to discourage smugglers and pirates, not take on Araxian warships. But they could provide a distraction, I suggested. Maybe even take out some of their landing craft if the Araxians commit to a ground assault. Wei nodded slowly. It's worth a try. I'll need command codes from Galactic Defense HQ, but given the situation, that shouldn't be a problem. As Wei moved away to make the necessary arrangements, Shimmering Path Navigator shifted closer to me, its colors pulsing in what I now recognized as an indication of private communication. First speaker, it said quietly. The people have one other defense that we have not yet revealed to the Sky Warriors. I glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. What kind of defense? A weapon of last resort, adapted from the most terrible of the Feathered One's own designs. It can disable ships in the high sky, but its use would reveal capabilities the people would prefer to keep hidden unless absolutely necessary. I considered this carefully. How terrible are we talking? It cannot destroy, only disable, but it does so by disrupting the patterns of thought within thinking machines and living minds alike. Temporarily only, but a neural disruption weapon, I realized. You're saying you have a way to essentially knock out the crews of the Araxian ships without destroying the vessels themselves? Yes, for a brief time only, perhaps enough for your Sky Warrior vessels to arrive, but its use would expose much about the people's achievements. I understood the dilemma. The Zekthal had developed a weapon that could potentially save us all, but using it would reveal to both humans and Araxians just how advanced their adapted technology had become, potentially making them a target for those who would fear such capabilities. Let's call that our absolute last resort, I decided. If it looks like the Araxians are going to start orbital bombardment, then we use it. Otherwise, we stick with conventional defenses and try to hold out until our reinforcements arrive. Shimmering Path Navigator-S colors signaled agreement. The people concur with first speaker's judgment. Over the next few hours, the situation evolved rapidly. The defense satellites were successfully activated and positioned to protect the outpost area. The Zekthal deployed their crystalline disruption network, creating a no-landing zone around our position that forced the Araxians to drop their troops at a distance of at least 5 kilometers in any direction. And then, predictably, the Araxians attacked. 3 troop carriers descended through the atmosphere, landing just beyond the range of our disruption field. Ground assault vehicles began deploying from the carriers, and Araxian soldiers, tall, avian forms in combat armor, began advancing toward our position in disciplined formation. They're really doing this, I said, watching the tactical display with a mixture of disbelief and resignation. They're launching a direct assault on a GDF outpost. This is an act of war. They're desperate, Wei replied, his voice calm despite the circumstances. Whatever's on those data storage devices must be damning indeed for them to risk open conflict. I turned to Shimmering Path Navigator. Are your people in position? The Zekthal diplomat's colors flashed affirmative. The people wait beneath the surface along their approach path. When the signal comes, we will emerge and strike. Wei gave a tight nod. Let them get halfway to our perimeter. We want to catch them fully committed, with no easy retreat to their landing craft. I watched the display as the Araxian forces advanced across the dusty terrain, their movements precise and clearly practiced. They outnumbered us significantly, perhaps 300 soldiers to our 50 human personnel and an unknown number of Zekthal fighters. They're approaching the designated engagement zone, the tactical officer reported. We tapped his command link. All units, prepare to engage on my mark. He paused, looking at Shimmering Path Navigator. Is your communication with your forces secure? The Zekthal made a gesture that translated roughly as affirmative. The people speak through stone in ways the Feathered Ones cannot hear. Then convey my mark to your forces as well, Wei said, turning back to the display. He watched the advancing Araxians for another moment, then nodded sharply. Mark. What followed was unlike any battle I had ever witnessed or imagined. The human defenders opened fire from prepared positions, targeting the lead Araxian vehicles with precision weapons fire. Simultaneously, the ground beneath the Araxian formation seemed to come alive, as dozens of Zekthal emerged from concealed tunnels directly in their midst. The Araxians, caught by surprise from both front and below, struggled to maintain their formation. Their air superiority fighters, small, agile craft designed for atmospheric combat, descended to provide support, only to be engaged by our activated defense satellites. The battle quickly devolved into chaos, exactly as planned. The Araxians had superior numbers and firepower, but their rigid tactical doctrine was ill-suited to fighting an enemy that could literally disappear into the ground and reappear elsewhere at will. It's working, I said, watching as the Araxian formation began to fragment, individual units becoming isolated and vulnerable. And then things changed. One of the Araxian warships in orbit shifted position, moving directly above the battlefield. They're powering up weapon systems, the sensor officer reported, voice tense. Looks like they're preparing for ground support fire. Wei cursed under his breath. They're going to start bombarding their own landing zone to hit our positions. I turned to Shimmering Path Navigator. I think it's time for that last resort we discussed. The Zekthal's colors pulsed in acknowledgement. It made a series of rapid gestures to a communication crystal it carried, a pattern too complex for the translator to interpret. For several tense moments, nothing happened. The Araxian warship continued to maneuver into position, its weapons systems fully charged and targeting algorithms locking onto our locations. Then, without warning, the ship's movements became erratic. On the tactical display, its systems began shutting down in cascading failure. Communications from the vessel ceased, replaced by garbled static. "What's happening?" Wei demanded, watching as the ship began to drift, its engines offline. "The people have activated the thought disruption device," Shimmering Path Navigator explained. "The sky vessel's crew and thinking machines are sleeping now." As we watched, the other Araxian ships in orbit began experiencing similar failures. Systems shutting down, communications going silent, controlled orbits degrading into unpowered drift. "Will they crash?" I asked, suddenly concerned about the implications of disabled starships falling from orbit. "No. The device affects thought patterns only, not basic system functions. Safety protocols will maintain minimal orbital stability, but the feathered ones will not be able to control their vessels until the effect fades." Wei looked at the Zekthal with newfound respect and, I noted, a hint of concern. "How long will this disruption last?" "Long enough for your Sky Warrior vessels to arrive," Shimmering Path Navigator replied. "Perhaps 6 of your hours." On the ground, the Araxian forces, cut off from orbital support and communications, began a disorganized retreat toward their landing craft. Without central coordination, their numerical advantage became meaningless. Wei activated his command link. "All units, focus on containment. I want those Araxian troops captured, not killed if possible. They're about to become very valuable prisoners of war." Over the next few hours, the combined human and Zekthal forces systematically surrounded and captured the retreating Araxians. Most surrendered when they realized their situation, cut off from their ships, commanders incapacitated, and facing an enemy that could literally attack from beneath their feet at any moment. By the time the GDF reinforcement vessels arrived, the battle, if it could even be called that, was over. The Araxian warships were secured by GDF boarding parties while still experiencing the effects of the Zekthal disruption device. The ground forces were disarmed and detained. More importantly, we had captured intact Araxian command data, directly from their warships and field commanders. Data that would corroborate the evidence the Zekthal had collected over the years. Standing in the command center, watching as GDF troops secured the outpost and processed Araxian prisoners, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Colonel Wei approached, looking tired but satisfied. "Well, Richards, I think it's safe to say you've exceeded the parameters of your original assignment." I snorted. "Just a bit, sir." "Galactic Command is sending a full diplomatic and scientific delegation. The evidence the Zekthal provided, combined with what we've captured today, is going to fundamentally alter our understanding of Araxian activities for the past several decades." "And the Zekthal?" I asked. "What happens to them now?" Wei glanced toward Shimmering Path Navigator, who was conferring with a group of its advisors across the room. "That's largely up to them. They've demonstrated capabilities that make them a significant new player in interstellar politics. Some in command will see them as a threat. Others will see potential allies. Most of all, they have the strongest possible claim to this planet, which we will fully support. They saved our lives today," I pointed out, "and potentially prevented a much larger conflict by exposing Araxian activities before they could deploy their more devastating weapons." "I'm aware," Wei said dryly, "which is why I've recommended you for a promotion and permanent assignment as diplomatic liaison to the Zekthal government." I blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "Don't look so shocked, Lieutenant. Or should I say Captain, pending approval. You have a unique relationship with the Zekthal leadership. They trust you. That's an invaluable asset that Galactic Command won't overlook, regardless of your unconventional approach to military protocol." Before I could respond, Shimmering Path Navigator approached, its colors displaying a pattern I'd come to recognize as satisfied accomplishment. "The people have conferred," it announced. "We wish to formalize our alliance with the Sky Warriors of the Galactic Defense Force, with First Speaker Richards as our primary voice." Wei nodded. "That aligns with our intentions as well. Captain Richards will be officially assigned as our diplomatic liaison, pending formal approval from our respective governments." Shimmering Path Navigator-S colors brightened. "The people are pleased. We have prepared something to mark this alliance." It gestured, and 2 Zekthal assistants entered the command center, carrying a crystalline container between them. Inside was a folded piece of fabric, or what appeared to be fabric at first glance. As they removed it from the container, I realized it was a flag, but unlike any I had seen before. The material seemed to shift and flow, its colors changing subtly as it moved. At its center was a design that combined Zekthal crystalline patterns with human symbolic elements, a representation of the planet Zektara with both surface and subterranean aspects depicted in intricate detail. The people have created this sky marker to symbolize our shared territory and purpose, Shimmering Path Navigator explained. It carries traces of all who have fallen defending this world, both people and sky warriors. I understood then that the shifting material contained elements of the iridescent scales or plates that covered the Zekthal's bodies, likely shed naturally during their life cycle, combined with synthetic materials that incorporated trace elements from human equipment, and even, perhaps, from the blood spilled during the recent battle. It's beautiful, I said sincerely, and powerful. It will stand on the surface to show all sky visitors that this world is claimed and defended, Shimmering Path Navigator continued. It marks the first alliance between the people and any sky civilization. Wei nodded appreciatively. We are honored. Perhaps Captain Richards would do the honors of raising this flag, as the first human to truly understand your people. And so, as the twin suns of Zektara began to set on a day that had changed the course of interstellar politics, I found myself standing outside the outpost, the Zekthal flag in my hands. A simple flagpole had been erected, not the standard GDF issue, but one crafted by the Zekthal from their crystalline materials, embedded deeply into the planet's surface. Around me stood an honor guard of both human soldiers and Zekthal warriors, their differences stark, yet their purpose now aligned. Colonel Wei and Shimmering Path Navigator watched with formal dignity as I attached the flag to the pole and raised it high. As it caught the wind and unfurled, its colors shifting in the dying light of the suns, I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of my situation. 6 months ago, I had been sent to this dead planet as punishment, expected to serve out a lonely, pointless assignment before returning to a diminished career. Now I stood as a captain, diplomatic liaison to a previously unknown sentient species, having helped foil an Araxian plot that could have led to interstellar war. The dead planet had a name, Zektara, and a flag that represented an alliance between species that had never known of each other's existence until I stumbled upon their hidden world. And, perhaps most ironically of all, it had a kill count, the wreckage of 5 Araxian warships now being towed into stable orbit, hundreds of Araxian prisoners being processed for transport to GDF detention facilities, and the shattered remains of their ground assault vehicles scattered across the dusty landscape. As the flag snapped in the breeze, Shimmering Path Navigator moved to stand beside me, its colors shifting to a pattern I now recognized as contemplative satisfaction. First Speaker Richards was sent to die on a dead world, it observed, echoing our earlier conversation. Yet both Richards and the world live. The people find this a favorable outcome. I smiled. You know what? So do I. The Zekthal's colors rippled in their version of laughter. The universe is indeed full of surprises, First Speaker. Perhaps you have finally learned to expect them. I recognized my own words from Colonel Wei's initial briefing, thrown back at me with perfect Zekthal precision. I'm getting there, I admitted, one diplomatic crisis at a time. And as the last light of the suns caught the shifting colors of the flag above us, the flag of a world that was never truly dead, only waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets, I found myself looking forward to the surprises yet to come.